Frederick Douglass observed the first meteor revolution, messages carried by lightning through telegraph wires, connecting continents in an instant. But a change has now come, he said. Wind, steam, and lightning are chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. When he wrote about technology penetrating darkness, little did he know that a century later, another technological revolution would again illuminate the truth. In August of 1963, television carried Dr. King's dream into American living rooms nationwide, igniting widespread support for the civil rights movement.
We will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will.
When television broadcast their relentless search for the Freedom Summer volunteers from Western College in Ohio after they disappeared in Mississippi, it sparked a national revolution against racial injustice, triggering America's reaction and reformed the nation's laws, proving that the civil rights movement was a national struggle. Following the 1890 Mississippi Constitution's implementation of poll taxes and literacy tests, the Supreme Court's ruling in Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, cemented Jim Crow segregation as constitutional law for nearly 7 decades. By 1964, these legal tools had reduced black voter registration in Mississippi to less than 7%, compared to 70% prior to Mississippi's establishment of their new constitution in 1890. Though Brown v. Board of Education ended school segregation in 1954, the Deep South responded with what became known as the Massive Resistance, a coordinated political strategy to preserve segregation at all costs. Senator James Eastland of Mississippi declared, "The South will not abide by or obey the decision." In 1956, 101 Southern congressmen and senators signed the Southern Manifesto in opposition to Brown. In Mississippi, segregation wasn't just custom. It was legally mandated across all areas of public life. Restaurants, hotels, swimming pools, movie theaters, hospitals, and transportation all remained segregated by law. In the summer of 1964, the Western College for Women in Oxford, Ohio hosted their training sessions that prepared volunteers for Freedom Summer. Here at the Freedom Summer Memorial, young volunteers prepared for Freedom Summer, a struggle that would lead them into the heart of Mississippi, one amplified by the rise of television. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "History will have to record the appalling silence of the good people." Television broke that silence.
Hotter summer than for almost anyone else in this country, but they believe their project will be the breakthrough in the civil rights battle. Their motto, crack Mississippi and you crack the whole South.
Hundreds of mostly white volunteers gathered for a 2-week training program where they learned how to establish freedom schools and register black voters in Mississippi, a mission that came with significant risk.
In Mississippi this summer, upwards of 1,000 students from all around the country who will engage in what we're calling freedom schools, community center programs, voter registration activities, and in general, a program designed to open up Mississippi to the country.
Yet the movement itself was not without internal tensions. Veteran black organizers from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee worried that the sudden influx of northern white students would overshadow local leadership and incite even greater violence. In living rooms everywhere, a quiet revolution was taking hold. Consider the American living room, a place of quiet refuge, transformed by a glowing screen. Reactionary to Reconstruction-era gains in black political power, Mississippi's 1890 Constitution and Jim Crow laws institutionalized voter suppression. Most Americans remain unaware of the extent of the suppression in southern states, especially Mississippi. Television ownership in the United States grew dramatically, rising from approximately 9% in 1950 to over 87% in 1960. The harsh truth of segregation, once a faraway whisper, suddenly became a nightly broadcast. News coverage of Freedom Summer became a regional media war. National television framed volunteers as idealistic reformers, while Southern outlets and politicians labeled them as outside agitators and communists through a practice called red baiting.
Tonight, Andrew Goodman and two companions, Mickey Schwerin and James Chaney, are the focus of a whole country's concern. They have been missing since Sunday in Mississippi, where they had gone as part of the Mississippi Freedom Summer Project, a project designed to draw national attention to the problem of Negro rights in that state. For the latest on the search for the three missing boys, we switch to CBS News correspondent Lou.
As freedom training in Ohio was coming to an end, a grim report seized the nation. Three young activists, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, had disappeared. When news reached the Western College campus that the Mount Zion Methodist Church had been bombed by the Klan, Schwerner left the training immediately to investigate. Goodman and Chaney drove down from Ohio to join him in Mississippi. After investigating the burned church, they were arrested by Sheriff Lawrence Rainey and Deputy Cecil Price on a traffic violation, held for several hours, and then released later that evening. Mississippi Senator James Eastland publicly charged that these events were merely a communist conspiracy. In a recorded phone call to President Johnson, Eastland dismissed the entire affair, saying, "I believe it's a publicity stunt."
I'll tell you why I don't think there's a damn thing to it. They were put in jail in Philadelphia, in East Mississippi, right next to John Stennis' home county. And they were going to Meridian. There's not a Ku Klux Klan in that area. There's not a citizens council in that area. There's no organized white man in that area. So that's why I think it's a publicity stunt. Now, if it had happened in other areas, I would pay more attention to it. But I happen to know.
For 44 agonizing days, national television coverage transformed the local search into a relentless national obsession.
The three civil rights workers who disappeared in Mississippi last Sunday night still have not been heard from. A search has thus far produced only one clue, the burned-out station wagon in which the three were last seen riding.
As Freedom Summer unfolded in Mississippi, Congress was moving. On June 19, 1964, lawmakers passed the Civil Rights Act, ending legal segregation in public spaces, employment, and schools. But 2 days later, the nation was confronted by a grim truth. The bodies of the three activists were found. Their murders provided undeniable proof of the brutality of Jim Crow laws. The fight for stronger voter rights continued in the Deep South, and after a televised brutal response to voting rights marches in Alabama, President Johnson addressed the nation, and 76% of the nation was rallying for the cause.
Must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome.
President Johnson sends to Congress a bill to reinforce the right to vote, with Attorney General.
That August, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, banning literacy tests and poll taxes, establishing federal oversight, and sending federal examiners to register voters.
Many civil rights activists believe that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was still necessary due to the denial of the right to vote of blacks in many Southern communities. Organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Congress of Racial Equality have been active in registering African Americans to vote in the South with little success prior to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
And so we return to the Western College for Women in Oxford, Ohio. Without the support of television, SNCC and CORE might not have been able to capture the nation's attention, transforming a regional struggle into a national movement, and rallying the public support necessary to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.